what Biden's border insanity means for America's future. That is what we're going to be talking about. On today's video, we're going to take a look at the destabilizing mess that's amassing on our southern border, why the Biden administration seems so reluctant to do anything about it, and what both the short-term and long-term ramifications are for Biden's blundering border policy. You're not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you. Wonderful to be with you. As always, we're here to give you each and every single day conservative hope in the midst of these turbulent and trying times, helping to think better so you can feel better and provide for you a patriot path to freedom. So make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. And before we begin, let's give a huge shout out to the sponsor of this video, and that's Prepper's Peak new solar water heater. With all of the lockdowns that we've been witnessing over the last several months, this solar water heater can turn out to be our very best friend. Solar water heater is an amazing device. It allows you to heat and boil water outdoors using what? Well, you guessed it, simply the sunlight. It can heat water in as little as 30 minutes and it'll work anywhere the sun shines. You can use it to boil water. You can use it to cook noodles and rice. You can use it to sterilize water for drinking. Perfect for you campers. And the best part is if you click on that link below, you actually get an additional 20% off their already reduced price. So do not wait. This is a limited time offer. Click on the link below before they sell out and get your own Patriot Sun cooker today. All right, gang, let's dive right in here. As I'm sure you all know, the United States, for whatever reason, is currently going through a massive surge of illegal immigration at the southern border. Things are so bad that the Mexican government is calling on the Biden administration to step up and end the lunacy that's seen a massive spike in drug cartel and human trafficking activity in Mexico and the southern border of the United States. We now have very alarming footage showing huge lines of migrants being smuggled across the Rio Grande into Texas. We frankly haven't seen anything like this in the last 4 years. This was, of course, one of the most exceptional accomplishments of the Trump administration in securing the southern border. But Biden's reinstitution of Obama-era catch and release, as well as his refusal to finish wall construction of the southern border, has emboldened migrants from Latin America to cross the border. Now, at one level, I can only see this as just nothing more than radical leftist payback against 4 years of relative border stability under Trump. I mean, this is payback. Okay, I frankly can't reconcile it any other way. This is payback to rural America for giving us 4 years of Trump and the border closing. Again, I'm frankly astounded because keep in mind, even Canada's Trudeau has largely closed his borders. Europe has largely closed their borders. Illegal immigration around the globe has effectively come to a halt as a result of COVID, except here. How is it that we're not allowed to send our kids to school, but illegal immigrants can enter completely unencumbered at our southern border? How is it that if I were to show up at JFK International without a passport, I'd be sent right back to my country of origin, but if I were to cross the Rio Grande without a passport, I'm welcomed as a hero? I mean, the only conclusion that I can come up to in all this is, of course, that it's purposeful. This border crisis, this humanitarian crisis is absolutely purposeful. The radicals in the Biden administration, because he's too busy napping, are just getting their revenge against us for slowing down their cultural Marxist project to politically and culturally transfigure the United States, which then leads to the question, what are the long-term ramifications, these massive waves of illegal immigration? Now, this is a question that came up during last night's Q&A with our Insiders Club members, which you can join, by the way, by clicking on the link below. You'll love it. But one of our members asked, what should we expect to happen as a result of all of this? What are going to be the long-term ramifications of this border instability? And I think there are two possible outworkings in all that, and that's what I want to develop for you here. I think we're looking at a short-range effect on the one hand and a long-range effect on the other. Okay, so that's what I want to do. Actually, let's start with the long-range effect. Okay, and this is what will most likely be some kind of outworking of Eric Kaufman's white shift thesis, and that's where the latest wave of immigrants end up inevitably going through an assimilation process into the more dominant culture, primarily through intermarriage. So Kaufman is operating here from the notion of what happened between the years of 1880 and 1960. And this was the last time we had a massive wave of immigration, during which time, as Kaufman documents, the Anglo-Protestant majority in the United States declined to less than half the total population. However, it was during this century period that the Anglo-Protestant majority actually gradually absorbed Catholic and Jewish immigrants and their children, largely through intermarriage, into what Kaufman calls a reconstituted sort of white majority oriented around a waspy archetype, right? So to give you a sense of what that means, at the beginning of the massive wave of immigration in the 1880s, ethnic groups such as Italians, Irish, Greeks, and Slavs, they were considered highly foreign to the Anglo-Protestant identity. But by the end of this period, by the 1960s, they were fully assimilated culturally, politically, into the dominant Anglo-Protestant culture, which itself widened now to include groups like Italians and Slavs and religious traditions like Catholics and Orthodox that were considered at one point radical, like at the beginning of the 1880s, totally foreign. Now, the primary means that this assimilation took place, of course, was through intermarriage of all these different groups. And what Kaufman argues is that we're basically already seeing the same process taking place today with the massive migration from Latin America. So while the first generation of migrants show a very low rate of intermarriage, that number tends to increase dramatically with their children and with their children's children. In some cases, particularly with Latinos, upwards of 40 or 50%. And the pattern that scholars have noticed is that the children of ethnically mixed parents overwhelmingly identify with the dominant ethnicity of the nation. So if you have an interracial marriage between someone who's, say, Asian and someone who's white, the children will tend to identify with whatever ethnic group represents the dominant ethnic group in their nation. So my wife is Japanese, right? If my wife and I raised our kids in Japan, they would more identify with Japanese culture than they would with a white American. And they would be significantly more likely to marry a Japanese spouse than if they were raised here in the United States. The pattern that scholars have noticed is that the children of ethnically mixed marriages tend to identify with the dominant ethnicity. So here in the States, that means people who report being partly white and partly some other race disproportionately end up marrying whites, upwards of 70% of the time. And their children, it's normally 90% of the time. They're 90% likely to grow up and marry into the dominant ethnic group, right? The point is if you're part of a mixed marriage and you have children, those children will identify with the dominant group, whatever it happens to be. So we're seeing Latinos now being brought into the dominant culture, very similar to the way Italians and Slavs were in the 1880s and 1960s. Now, that's the long-term picture. Short-term, things are going to be unbelievably volatile. Until we have that kind of cultural equilibrium, the social situation here is going to be unbelievably unstable. Now, before we get into that, if you are looking for an encouraging and hopeful alternative to all the fake news nonsense that's being spewed out there on a daily basis from the likes of CNN and MSNBC and the far-left New York Times, you're going to find no better antidote than what's in the pages of my book, The Return of Christendom. Do not take my word for it. Just read through the reviews on Amazon. There's over 260 of them. And you'll see how this book cuts through all the cynicism and despair that we so often feel living in this crazy globalist world. In page after page, I give you all the data, the stats, the indicators that show nothing less than a new conservative Christian majority emerging, not just in the United States, but Europe as well. And it's already transforming the world map into a more nationalist, populist, and traditionalist world. And if you click on that link below, we're offering it for a limited time at 50% off. It's a 50% discount, so do not wait. It's a limited time offer. Click on that link and get your book at a super discount today and arm yourself with the information you need to crush fake news once and for all. All right, so right now, we're in what we might call an interstices moment, an interregnum, where that longitudinal culture and political assimilation has yet to happen, at least at the level it needs to. And so what we're left with in the meantime is modern-day California, which is ripe with ethnocentric cultural Marxism, where different ethnic groups who are not assimilated into the broader culture end up effectively balkanizing around ethnocentric identities. And this is the real threat to our national unity, as I see it. You see, a number of scholars have recognized that populations around the world are increasingly balkanizing as they turn towards their own ethnic identities and loyalties based on kin and race as the basis for a postmodern social order. And here in the United States, we can see comparable balkanizing tendencies in the rhetoric of Black Lives Matter or La Raza, other cultural Marxist sentiments and the like. And so my basic working thesis is that with the death of the Cold War world and the death of modernity as a whole, the entire world is breaking up into ethnic enclaves, into ethno-tribalisms, a breakup that risks shattering more and more nation states into microstates organized around their own respective ethnocentric sentiments. So this is a fancy-schmancy way of basically saying the whole world is moving to the right. We're either moving toward a more culturally assimilated civic nationalism, like what was advocated by President Trump and the MAGA movement, or we're breaking up and balkanizing into more ethno-nationalisms. Either way, nationalism wins. The question is whether the cultural Marxism that breeds ethnocentric tribalisms is going to prevent and frustrate the kind of political and cultural assimilation needed for a vibrant and viable civic nationalism. And I think the good news on that end is a significant shift in sentiment among Latinos toward the cultural and political right here in our nation. We saw this particularly in Florida, where 70% of Cuban Americans voted for Trump. Latinos are increasingly attracted to the nationalist right's emphasis on nation, culture, custom, tradition, faith, family, freedom, and they're fast becoming one of the most important constituents within the emerging populist right that's taking over the Republican Party. So I'm hoping that that development is a promising sign that the very same assimilation processes we saw operative between 1880 and 1960 will be operative in the decades ahead. And to that end, the tribalistic tendencies of cultural Marxism will indeed be defeated. And President Trump's dream of a new civic nationalism will emerge for generations to come. Now, before you go, make sure to like this video, comment down below, and subscribe to my channel. Definitely click on the link and check out our really cool merch. And you definitely want to check out my latest video I just uploaded on how Antifa riots are erupting once again in Portland as Minneapolis citizens are held hostage by a new anti-cop autonomous zone. You're not going to want to miss it. So make sure to click on the link, and I will see you over there. God bless.